Okay, wonderful. I'm Celeste.
And I'm Danielle, and we are the founders of the Somatica Institute of Sex and Relationship Coaching. At the Institute, we train coaches to empower people in every area of their lives, especially in their sex lives and relationships. We also help people transform their own lives. So it's both for coaches and for people who take it for their own personal goals. The more people are in touch with their deepest desires and have done healing around their desires, around shame, and feel much more empowered around the relational wounds and around themselves, the more they can create the lives that they want to really live. And we want to empower people to live the full rainbow of potential and really create the life that they want to live. So that's what we are doing in the Somatica Institute.
And it's so amazing to watch people become more and more empowered in their lives. And they take a weekend of the training, and then they're like, come back and they're like, and I practiced my boundaries and I asked for what I wanted. And it's really, really beautiful. So today we're going to talk specifically about how to empower people who were socialized as women as a sex and relationship coach. We're also going to have an upcoming webinar on how to empower people who were socialized as men, because regardless of what gender you realize that you are later on in life, sometimes we stay the gender that we were assigned at birth. Sometimes we realize that's not the case and that we were assigned wrong. So whether you're cisgender, transgender, non-binary, we all go through the same gender socialization process. And while there are a lot of similarities about what people need for personal empowerment, there are some differences based on that different socialization that we get.
How do we empower people who are socialized as women, as coaches? And as Celeste said, our society really assigns us all gender at birth. It also, the minute a baby is born, they're being treated, there's been research that show that the minute babies are born, or even like in the womb, they've been treated differently based on their assigned gender. And the way girls and women are socialized around the sexuality and romantic relationship, what we found again and again, and what research found, is that it blocks them from having the full agency and power in their lives and in their relationship. And what we are going to do here is to really break down what are the messages that women got as they got assigned this gender, and how can we help them as coaches, because we can really change the world if we help women own their sexuality. What is missing many times, because there's lots of empowerment programs out there, but what's missing is many times the connection to sexuality. And if we are not helping women connect with sexuality, we're missing out, because there's so much power and potency and energy and aliveness and ownership of the self when people are connected to their sexuality.
Yes, I want to say a little bit about growing up. As a girl, I think we get a lot of messages that we are like less capable, less intelligent. There's like a disrespect for our abilities that disempowers us very early on in life. And that's just in general in all areas of our lives. And then there are much more specific messages that disempower us in our relationships and in our sex lives. One of them that's really interesting is that we're often seen as worthy in our ability to get and maintain a relationship, and also like our ability to have children, find someone to provide for those children, and almost as though those are like the achievements that we're supposed to have in life. And there's wonderful things to experience if that's what you want, but that's not what everyone wants. And I think a lot of times people who are socialized as men get more accolades in the world for what they can do out in the world in business and that kind of success. And that has its own different problems. But being socialized with the idea that you're supposed to get a relationship and maintain a relationship, and you're supposed to have children. I can't even tell you, as a woman who decided not to have children, how many times people told me throughout my life, oh, you'll change your mind. Oh, you just think that now. You'll really want children someday. And I didn't ever want children, and I'm really happy that I didn't have children. I think it's even like controversial to say that because of this kind of socialization. And then if you decide you want to be single, or if you don't feel like that's what it is that kind of defines your success, there's a lot of sort of negative messaging in our society around that, around being single or not not choosing to be a mother, that causes us to feel like that, like we need to go out and get a relationship and cling to a relationship and feel like we have to have and keep a relationship just in order to be seen as worthy in our society.
Yeah, there's another particular way that we are told that we're supposed to be feminine, and we're shamed in police if women are a little too masculine or not graceful. I remember my mom really wanted me to have like great success in life, and what she like my whole life, she just sent me to all kinds of preparation schools, and I don't even know how you say it because I'm not from here, but there was like, oh, you need to be a lady, you need to be graceful, you need to like own the way you look and the way you know, and it created a lot of hurt in me around self-acceptance, and which like I had to work through, and Somatica, creating the method and teaching it ongoing and being in relationship with women around bodies and self-love really helps me as well as a teacher and as a woman to love my body. But these are the messages many women still get, that you need to be in some sort of specific box, and if you're too masculine or too aggressive, you're not the right kind. You're gonna be like cast away in some way.
And it's interesting because I think from the outside, I fit very much into the feminine stereotype. But I think on the inside, I'm actually very masculine and very aggressive. Like growing up, I was always the one who was making moves on people. I'm super horny. And all of those things were like, that's not feminine to be that way, or you need to find your femininity or your feminine energy as a sexual being or as a woman. Like there's messages that we're given that that's the only way that we're going to have a fulfilling sex life. And I think regardless of your, whether you look feminine or whether you don't look feminine, whether you were a tomboy growing up, and I think there's a little bit more room for masculinity with just the label of tomboy as opposed to what the way that boys get socialized around that and repressed around that. But still, there's a lot of pressure. I know so many of my clients who maybe like they were more sporty or something like that, and their parents made them wear dresses places, and they just felt like, this isn't even who I am. Like, why am I, like, I want to run around and play, and you've got me in these horrible shoes that are not allowed to get muddy. So there's all of this like containment of our energy.
Yeah, I was a competitive swimmer when I was a teenager, and my mom literally pulled me out from the team because she was worried that I'm going to have too much of a broad shoulders. She wanted me so much to be feminine. It's really sad in some ways. We are being fed this with this fairy tale. And I want to say that mostly because television and media is very much white. So white women are offered this fairy tale version of relationship where they're like taught to follow their feeling of love in all costs. And they expect the man to take care of them and save them from ever having been to be disappointed or deal with negative relationship and negative feelings. And this kind of like creates kind of like entitlements to happily ever after, and it can impact women around feeling very angry and upset in relationship and feel very often disappointed. And we see it a lot in our offices, this like disappointment from the prince not showing up. And of course it impacts on relationship, but it also impacts on how women experience themselves in relationship, because it's very disempowering to feel that everything that has to come through you is something, it puts you in the victim role, and there's like really a big discernment of potential partners if they're not like that prince who slays the dragons for me and saves me from the high tower. And it sounds maybe funny, but this is keep being reinforced over and over again in every romantic movie that you're going to see. And yes.
Yeah, and I think even though it's a very heteronormative fairy tale, women, whether we're lesbian or bisexual or straight, can be indoctrinated into this idea that our partner is supposed to save us. And I think also largely, as Danielle was saying, the imagery is really fed much more as a white woman. It's like women of color often get left out of this idea of the fairy tale, which, as we said, the fairy tale can be very destructive. Sometimes you buy into it. And then also, I think women of color have to deal with all of the racialized stereotypes. So just imagine you're going on a date and you sit down in front of your date, and just because of the color of your skin or the country that you came from, your ethnicity, there's assumptions about who you are as a relational or a sexual being that women who are white don't have to deal with. So I think part of the empowerment is also helping everyone see themselves and each other as individuals and not be lumped into these stereotypical assumptions. And in addition to this fairy tale, I think people who are socialized as women were very much policed and shamed around their bodies and also around slut shaming. You're not supposed to be, your body's supposed to be a particular way, it's supposed to be a particular size, a particular shape, and you're not supposed to be slutty or horny. There's a lot of messaging around like damp down this sexual piece of ourselves, and we have to have a particular body type in order to really be desired or desirable or sexual. So there's a lot of revolution that needs to happen around empowerment so that we can claim our bodies and our sexuality away from these restrictions that we're dealing with all the time.
Yeah, and if you start to feel gloomy and sad, that makes sense because it's very sad, and it's really important to be aware of those messages. And no, it's Friday morning, and so damn, we signed up for this webinar. Do I need to hear all this grim news? And I was like, it's not news, and it is happening around us. And if we're not aware to that, like that we're growing up in this pot of messages, we won't be able to like really help women feel empowered, because the lack of awareness, like awareness is the first step to really move towards empowerment. So we're gonna share other things that other messages that help like constrict the people who were raised as women. And one of them is virginity. Like, you still today, I'm coming from a different culture, but still I am amazed. I checked with my daughter who is 19 whether it's still popular, virginity. Yes, it is still popular. When it comes to sex, girls are given strong messages around the importance of keeping their virginity. Check the Jane the Virgin. She got pregnant, but she kept her virginity. It's amazing. And shamed that they're sluts if they put out sex and allow themselves to have sex just because they want it. So virginity.
Very, very important. And I think there's so many other fear messages around sex also. Girls and women are rarely told that they're deserving of pleasure. And I actually did research on teenage girls' sexuality, and particularly young girls' experiences of giving blowjobs to boys, like high school girls. And there was no, when we interviewed these girls, there had never been any discussion of like pleasure, that they had a right to pleasure, that pleasure was important to them. And they were giving blowjobs, unfortunately, just to please boys, to maintain their virginity, to stave off like intercourse, as opposed to feeling empowered around their own pleasure and their own desires and being told that they deserved pleasure, which I think is actually quite a protective thing to tell girls and young women, as opposed to you should just say no, you need to be the gatekeepers of sex, you need to avoid being a slut.
And another important message that we see a lot is the message of be nice. And girls are shamed if they behave in any way that feels masculine, aggressive, which we talked about earlier, or like state their opinion or have big feelings or explode or anything like that. And this actually makes it really difficult for them to keep their actual boundaries and to ask clearly and directly for what they want. And that really is super disempowering. Being nice is disempowering.
Hallelujah. Stop being nice. Start saying what you want and don't want. And finally, I think the other thing that can be very disempowering is to have a history of sexual trauma, and also just this sort of trauma of walking around the world as a woman. And this is true for cis women, this is true for trans women, this is true for women who don't fit into the sort of gendered stereotypes. I think there's always a fear that there could be some kind of violation, even just like a violation of your space. Hey, you should smile more, or like just people yelling at you, those kinds of things. And then I think like a weird thing that people might not realize is that I was talking about it with my housemate just yesterday, the way that when you're out in the world, there's this hypervigilance of, I was just thinking, I think I call it like rape planning or something like that. Like I was at the track the other day and I realized I was there by myself and that there was like places where I wouldn't be able to be seen by other people. And I made myself like a escape plan. And that was just something like running in the back of my head. I didn't even consciously think about it until we started having this conversation. So I think there's this sort of feeling of the world isn't totally safe, which I think makes us much like repress our sexuality, our sexiness when we go out into the world, or to not to go ahead and just show those parts of ourselves, but then be aware that we might get this kind of energy that we don't want coming at us. Those are the kinds of choices and trade-offs that we need to make that can be very disempowering. So in order to be a coach, to be a coach to women is to really be aware of all of these challenges and to help women realize like what they're navigating in order to be able to be empowered and to start to let go and get rid of some of these negative messages.
Yeah, so in Somatica, we offer many women empowerment tools, and the training is very experiential. So it's not like just here in the webinar we get to, because it's a webinar, we get to share a lot of the philosophy with you and the ideas behind Somatica. But in the training, you get to really practice a lot of tools with your classmates to really get to this place of empowerment and self-love and understanding of your boundaries, and developing, reclaiming women's power and their selfhood. And we just see it throughout the training. And we'll go through some of the tools as we continue this webinar. But it's amazing that one of the strongest, most powerful things that people take, like right after module 1, is this feeling like, oh my God, I get to have boundaries. I recognize my boundaries. I can state my boundaries, like having this strong sense of self and who am I, where do I start and where do I finish? It is so powerful because that is the foundation of being able to build on the other tools.
And I just want to quickly answer this question before we move on, because it's about the disempowerment piece. What about the world doesn't feel safe? I just want to say that there are some things about the world that aren't safe, not just that they don't feel safe, if that makes sense. I have been chased, I have been followed and had somebody yell and scream behind me. I've had someone kick me out in the world, just walking out in the world. And I think what doesn't feel safe is that because I'm smaller, that someone who is larger and more powerful could do things to my body or overpower me and in ways that I don't want to. So if I'm at a party, like I need to be careful. Am I staying sober enough so that I can make sure that nothing bad happens to me? Because I have many friends who got drunk and passed out at a party and then ended up being sexually assaulted. It creates a level of we can't just be as free and safe as we want to be, because bad things do happen. So I guess I just want to say it's not just a feeling, bad things do happen. And that does repress some of our sense of like safety and empowerment in the world, because sometimes the world isn't safe. And we need to figure out, in the world that we live in right now, that has these places that are not safe and these experiences that are not safe, how do we still get to be in our power, feel our sense of boundaries, go out and be the powerful, erotic, and like joy-filled and pleasure-filled people that we want to be, knowing that the world does sometimes have this lack of safety in it.
And many times really tapping into our boundaries, our embodied boundaries. We're not just talking about like what I should do. It's more like really finding our embodied boundaries and what is really right for us. This many times also help us navigate situations better, because then we are much more embodied and sense like, when is it not safe to bring myself fully? Where is it safe to go home now and keep myself like much more guarded? And that doesn't mean, this is part of empowerment. Part of empowerment is to know that I have access to myself. I have access to my erotic energy. I have access to my core sexuality, and from there I can choose what I want. Because many times the lack of empowerment around sexuality makes women and make really bad choices, because they don't have this anchor in their body that tells them what is right and what is right for them in that moment. And many times they just violate their own boundaries by succumbing to things that are offered that they don't want to do, but they don't have this access to their body to know what's right for them and what's not right for them. And I'm not talking about force. I'm talking about when they sometimes making choices that are not embodied choices.
Yeah, and to just say that doesn't in any way blame anybody for having something bad happen to them or some kind of assault happen to them. It's merely to say the more in our bodies, the less feeling that we have to be the less feeling that we have to be nice and take care of everybody else, the more we can feel our bodies and our spidey senses tingling, oh, this is not a good situation, as opposed to being disconnected and cut off from our bodies. The more we can sense, oh, I like this. This is pleasurable. This is good. I don't like this. This is not pleasurable. This is bad, early and often, the more that we can navigate the world in a way that ends up with us having more positive and pleasurable experiences and less experiences that we don't want to have.
Yes, it also very much brings us to part of what we work in the training is also around empowerment around trauma, because many people that come to the training because that's the way the world is, experience some sort of trauma. We help women navigate this place of like, how do I connect with myself and work through those experiences I had in the past, and how do I become empowered around my trauma, and get again, come back to a sense of safety in my body, and a sense of I'm here, I can take care of myself, and I can go beyond the experiences that happened to me in life.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of, in the training, we really work with people, everyone actually, around healing from any crossed boundaries and reclaiming the right to their body, and to know this is my body. I don't have to, like, I don't have to do anything that doesn't feel good. I don't have to cross any boundaries, and reconstituting this sense of, because sometimes when we're kids, like, people, like, parents spank, or we like get grabbed, or things happen to our bodies that like make us feel like it's not our bodies and we don't have a right to our bodies. And so to reclaim the sense, this is my body, I get to choose what happens to it and what doesn't happen to it, and reconstitute some ways in which our bodies boundaries have been breached, that's something that we really work on in the training, to help people feel more in their bodies and possessed, self-possessed, I think, is like foundational to a sense of empowerment.
And as we are helping people connect with their sexuality, and especially women connect with their sexuality is something that is theirs and not something that they give. It's something that it's theirs to enjoy, and they decide how they share it. It creates such an amazing source of empowerment, because our sexuality is our life force. And when we're disconnected from it, we're walking in the world disembodied, and moving into our pelvic floor, residing in our pelvic floor, in our pussies, and having this connection with ourselves. She becomes our oracle. She tells us when is it a good time to share, and when she's not ready. And we really help women to start to speak up to their true selves and recognize it first, connect with it, feel the safety of residing in your own body and in your pussy and in your sexuality, and then share it with the people that you want to share it with.
Yeah, and also I think to love our bodies exactly how they are. We have this sort of onslaught from the outside world of glamour magazines and television. All of those things show a particular type, body type and shape and size and even color, that's supposed to be how you look. And so people who don't fit inside of that feel like they don't have a right to their pleasure, or don't have a right to their bodies as like this center of pleasure. And to bring people back, instead of looking at ourselves with this outside critical eye and saying, oh, this is what's wrong with your thighs, or this is what's wrong with that, to actually say, this is the source of my pleasure. This body that I have, however shape, whatever size, this is the source of my pleasure. And I get to feel that beautiful pleasure regardless of those things. And I don't need to change myself or be a particular way or be some other way than how I am, in order to have amazing love and pleasure and sex and joy in my life.
All this reconnection with the self, and bringing more self-love and this like self and empowerment really helps women, not only in the bedroom. It helps them with their relationships with people. It helps them because when you start to feel your boundaries and feel who you are and feel great and amazing about who you are, you can start to feel, oh, I can say no to people. I don't have to be nice. I can say what I want. I can start to take care of myself. And it also very empowering we say like from the bedroom to the boardroom, because it's also very empowering at work. And and women start to ask for what they want and ask for higher salary, and like really go out there in the world and feel that they belong, and this is a place for them as much as it is for anyone else. And if you want to be a coach and help women get to those places, this is the place for you, because this is like Somatica is such a profound place to first go through this transformation yourself, and also learn how to learn amazing, powerful tools to help you empower women or people socialized as women coming to your office. And of course, we definitely help women who socialize as like people who socialize as women that are trans or non-binary folks, understanding that this socialization impacts them as well, even though they're like choosing different body or
Embracing the gender that they are now. And I think the other piece that's really important is empowering people who are socialized women emotionally. I think one thing that actually we're lucky for being socialized as girls and women is that we're given more right to have our feelings, in the sense that we aren't repressed around our feelings to the level that people who are socialized as boys and men are very repressed around their emotions. So we are given a right to our feelings, but we often aren't given a sense of empowerment and choicefulness and responsibility around our feelings, and really helping women to be empowered out in the world and share their feelings in a way that's vulnerable and not critical, not to be nice and try to make everything okay, but to actually say, this is how I feel and this is what I need, without blaming or shaming somebody else. Because I think a lot of times part of what we don't necessarily do is really fully grow up around our emotions. I think as a culture, we can see what's happening out in the world. Nobody's growing up very well around their emotions. People are just going after each other. To really be empowered around our emotions means to know, like, when we get triggered, why we've gotten triggered, and to see, how do we soothe ourselves? How do we ask for help in soothing? How do we share our feelings more vulnerably and clearly and in a non-blaming and shaming way? I think some of the blaming and shaming comes out of this fairy tale idea that it's like somebody else is supposed to give you your joy. And so emotional empowerment means like saying, no, I own my joy, and I'm not going to stay in situations that make me miserable. I'm also not going to blame and shame other people for the things that make me feel triggered or scared. I'm going to talk about those feelings. I'm going to work to heal some of that, and I'm going to find out ways to take care of myself, and to get a support system to help take care of me when I do get off balance in my emotions. So I think emotional empowerment is really key to empowerment for folks who are socialized as women.
Yeah, and I hear the few men here are very excited about supporting in our Q&A here. Very really want to know how they can support women, and that also brings us to talk about supporting women throughout different phases of life. That's something important that we also cover in the training, how, because hormones, different days of the month, different times in my fertile cycle, whether when women are pregnant or postpartum or menopausal or perimenopausal, every day is a new journey. And I think if you are there to support your partner in this journey of life, a lot of it is listening and loving, but not, and sometimes when women are giving compliments and they're not ready to hear those compliments, and they don't have a landing place inside them, those compliments are not going to land. And there's something about, like, really, we talk about like we help the women to let those compliments land, but also just saying the compliments sometimes not going to be helpful, but listening to how they feel and understanding where they are and just being super empathetic can be more helpful.
I think another thing that really helps empower, because of the ways that we've been socialized away from our sexuality and away from our desires, is that we help women discover their core desires and what they really want sexually, what turns them on, what are the fantasies, what kind of actions do they want to have, what in their erotic experiences. And that this is extremely empowering, because a lot of times people who are socialized as girls and women, because of the slut shaming, they're taught to just wait and hope that the kind of sex that they want happens for them. This is also part of the fairy tale. But when you start to get deeply into finding out, yeah, what do I want and what turns me on and what is on the menu here in terms of all of the different ways that you can feel arousal, both physiological, sensual arousal and like psychological, emotional arousal that creates the hottest sex that we can have. The more that we say, oh, this is my core desire. These are my movies, the hottest sexual movies of the things that I want to happen for myself. There's this feeling of that's very empowering. There's this feeling of it's not somebody else's job to give it to me and me like hope and wait and lie back here. It's my job to go out and say, hey, I really like it when you touch me. Like this feels so good. And can you say this to me? And can we have these kinds of experiences leading up to sex? Because a lot of times what turns us on isn't just the actual sexual acts, but the whole story and experience around it. And the more we know about that, and the more we own that, and the more we are not ashamed that we are sexual beings, the more we feel empowered to walk around in our lives and more deeply connected with our bodies. I feel like I can even picture this different kind of like way that you walk in your body and the way that you stand and the way that you hold yourself as you begin to feel like, yes, I know what gives me pleasure and I have a right to that pleasure. There's like this confidence that you feel inside and that radiates out from your body, and I think really draws people in terms of attraction and like creates the energy, the connected energy between you and other people, because you're owning that part of yourself that I think has been very robbed of us historically. So that's a kind of confidence that we take everywhere in our lives. Again, like Danielle said, from the bedroom to the boardroom, when we turn off that part of ourselves, something shrinks inside of us. And when we reconnect to that river of pleasure and desire and power in our bodies, something expands inside of us and it makes us walk in the world differently.
Yeah, and that also reminds me that we are also talking a lot about the menu, the psychological menu, and also the physiological menu of how to have bigger, better experiences, not from a place of pressure, but just like from a place of greediness. And yeah, I want more. I want to have amazing life, and we do some pleasure mapping and really like how to because so much of what we can enjoy sexually can be like developed over time, and it's not just, oh, I've got it once and that's it. And then so we definitely work on that as well, which is wonderful.
Yeah, and we're happy to answer more questions if you have anything else that's coming up as you're listening to this. We'd love to hear like what you're feeling, even what you're feeling in your body, or what this makes you think, or just anything that you want to share around questions that you have around empowering people who are socialized as women. And I do want to say one of the challenging things about being socialized as women is that it really restricts our sort of full expression of our gender, because what's really true is that everybody has human traits, right? Like we split them into these are male traits and these are female traits, and then we police people to stay in their corners. But the truth is, they're human traits. And so, again, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, trans, non binary, like just owning the full menu of your ways of expressing yourself in the world, of how you want to dress, of who you want to be with sexually, right? Like all of those things are things, again, that get restricted because of the policing around gender and sexuality for people socialized as women. So to find that full range of human expression again, and to go out and be like, this is who I am. I don't have to apologize. I don't have to explain. I can be who I am and celebrate that and embrace that in my life. That's so much of what we try to help people do in Somatica, to start to say, okay, this culture gives us very restricted amounts of expression that we're allowed to have. And it shuts down our voice in the bedroom, which is so sad because the more noise we make, often that creates more pleasure and sensation. Although sometimes people like being very quiet too. There's no right way to have sex. And our voice gets shut down out in the world as well, the more that we're restricted around our full sense of expression. So we want to open up people's voices across, like I said, the gender spectrum, the sexual identity spectrum, and for everyone to feel like they have a right to their pleasure. They have a right to love who they love. They have a right to wear the clothes they want to wear and be the gender that they feel themselves to be on the inside.
Wonderful. It's been pure pleasure to be here with you. So if you enjoyed this webinar, please like us on Facebook, ring the bell on YouTube, and we can and subscribe to our YouTube. We definitely share more and more information and put our videos on YouTube, and we're really looking forward to seeing more of you, and we are looking forward to really much better 2021. So Happy New Year to you all as well.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.